I guess I can start. So I graduated over a year ago, and I moved to Virginia for a year, and I worked at a state psychiatric hospital, Central State Hospital. So there I worked with patients that have collected criminal charges. Some are misdemeanors, some are felonies. Um, and I worked with them as they worked through the gradual release process. So a lot of them were not guilty by reason of insanity. And when you plea that, there's a whole stepwise process that takes years to go through. And I worked a lot with patients to, transition back into the community. And then I offered insight on like independent living skills, whether they could live alone or if they needed assistance outside of the hospital. And then obviously Pittsburgh is my home. So I moved back to Pittsburgh and I am up the hill at Western Psych again. I worked there for 6 years and here I came back and I am the assistant program director on the general adult unit. So that's a little background on me.
Okay, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Lisa Jaegers. I'm here in St. Louis, Missouri at St. Louis University. And I've been a practitioner since 2001 and started in workplace health, where I went to different manufacturing plants and places to treat workers who are injured, but then also do injury prevention programming. And over time went back to school multiple times because I graduated with a bachelor's degree in OT way back in the day. So it led me to get my PhD in public health. And when I finished that up, I was looking for a faculty position. I had done a lot of adjunct teaching and research work and came here to St. Louis U. And at that time, they introduced me to a prison setting where they have a prison education program where people, both staff and people incarcerated, can seek an associate's degree. So at that time, I learned about workplace health in prison facilities and then also the needs of people reentering the community from prison. And that launched into my role, which is more of a program developer for OT reentry programming with people leaving jails and prisons, and then also workplace health that's grown to national efforts where I have funded National Institute of Corrections projects looking at organizational stress and trauma among workers and how can we address that through leadership, middle management, and boots on the ground. So I'll stop there. Nice to see everyone today.
I guess that's me. Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole. I am in Augusta, Georgia, and I currently work at the Augusta State Medical Prison. I feel old. I got my master's degree in OT way back in 1996 at the University of Southern California. And I worked out there for a couple of years at USC University Hospital, which is now the Keck School of Medicine. And then I came back to Augusta, Georgia after we started having kids and started working with my husband, who has a day program for adults with developmental disabilities. So I kind of switched and did some curriculum programming for him and developing that program and started my own staffing company. And I was only in that for about a year and a half when a friend of ours whose mother used to work with my dad when he had a rehab company, it's a strange little thing there. She had the contract out of Augusta State Medical Prison. And in 2012, she called me and she said, "Hey, I've got one OT patient. Would you come and just see this one OT patient for me?" So that was in 2012, and I've been working there full-time now since then in their physical disabilities. I basically do outpatient and inpatient rehab in the flagship hospital for the Georgia Department of Corrections. So, oh, and now I have my, thanks to Lily, for those of you who know Lily, and Roberto and Violet and Kenzo, I now have Wesley, who is my facility dog, and he works with me to treat patients there.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing a little bit about what your career looks like. So we had people who put some questions online. So the first one is, what interventions can you do in the context of the justice system? What do you wish you could do, but you haven't been able to, or haven't figured out how to yet? And if we just want to like go in the same order or whatever works.
Yeah, so I felt that I had a lot more flexibility in that I was at a state psychiatric hospital. So it wasn't like the forensic system, but because it was a psych hospital, I think there was more of a focus on recovery, and the goal was to transition into the community and get our patients as independent as possible, making good choices and doing what they need to do. Um, so with that, I think I personally, intervention wise, I did a lot of one-on-ones on just basic like ADL training. We had a lot of patients that have intellectual disabilities that are a little bit lower functioning and, kind of needed help on, daily hygiene and showering and all that. So I would work one-on-one a couple times a week with patients in like the maximum security setting. I also did independent living skills assessments. So when patients were getting close to discharge, I would go in and, it was kind of, I like to call it the Kells on steroids. So it was like the Kells. And then I did a lot of other more functional tasks to see, can this patient live alone? Can they live alone with check-ins weekly? Can they, what level can this patient live outside of the hospital? And then on top of that, I ran groups. So I did independent living skills groups with, there were some not guilty by reason of insanity folks that were there long term. So it was more, I want to say like higher level independent living skills. So we would work on, money management and building a resume and kind of getting, those higher functioning skills to, be self-sufficient outside of the hospital. And then I also was on the treatment team for the neurocognitive unit, which was a lot of, I don't want to say lower functioning, but they had, neurocognitive challenges, whether it be from years of addiction or just intellectual disability in general or dementia, all that. So we did like more basic independent living skills groups. What else did I do? I've done other interventions. I kind of introduced a walking group. So patients that don't have as intense, I guess, I want to say as charges. So they were allowed to walk the grounds. And so we got a little walking group going. And I think in terms of, things that I wish I could have done while I was there, I think there's a limit when you work a government job. They have budgets and, you can only spend so much money on certain things. So ideally, I'd like to see like more of a like work program kind of thing. So yes, we're making these resumes and doing all this stuff, but like having somewhere these patients can go to apply that knowledge to like make the transition seamless. That's what I would have liked to see. And then here it's very different, but I think I'll get to that later on in our questions, but yeah.
Awesome. So like I mentioned before, I'm more of a program developer and I oversee and manage the programming, and our occupational therapy staff, they run the actual interventions. What I can speak to in terms of workplace health is that is how we built rapport and were able to start reentry services in the city of St. Louis jail over time. So I did focus groups and surveys throughout an entire jail system and also with rural jails, and learned about the needs of the workers. And then once we had kind of built that rapport, we then went to the city jail and said, we're obviously very invested and interested in learning about this as a workplace, but also occupational therapy can provide reentry services to the people who are held in your facilities. And these are the things that we can do. So that's how we started a 5-year long contract with the city and had a full-time occupational therapist staffed within the facility. And then we also built it out with field work and capstone students and volunteer students from social work and other professions. So the types of interventions that were being done on the reentry side, and when I say reentry, I mean a person planning for their release to the community, as compared to like inpatient care, like for a rehabilitative need. We weren't doing any treatment, so to speak, for someone who had, say, a stroke or a TBI or something like that. We were solely focused on what are your goals for reentering the community and what sort of things can we focus on there. So we served as a liaison between the clients and then tons of different community service providers, like behavioral health services, substance use treatment, housing, employment services, things like that. And the OTs would perform a full like Canadian occupational performance measure and different screening tools to understand what was their mental health status, cognitive status, what sort of things were they focused on with ADLs and things like that. So we really focus in and try to deliver individualized services that are tailored to each person. So types of interventions would be seeking and managing employment, attaining housing and sustaining housing, like household management skills, connecting with supportive networks, looking at community mobility, using public transportation or working towards a driver's license and driving on their own. And then discussing working through coping and parenting skills, regulating emotions, managing their mental health and physical health. And then we think a really big key thing is identifying when they have free time, how to spend leisure time, because we feel like that can lead to a whole wide range of sanctioned and non-sanctioned activities that can lead to arrest. So the ultimate goal is that the person becomes as independent as possible with their everyday living activities and sustain their community living, and of course, avoid or prevent rearrest. So I'll kind of stop there. Oh, and then what do you wish you could do, but you haven't been able to? So that was just one portion of our program. We worked with many different things, but if you think about SAMHSA has what they call the sequential intercept model of incarceration, basically. And I would love to see occupational therapy in every stage of pre-incarceration, all the way through the judicial system and prison. So I would love to see us get to more of a prevention mode. So if you're interested in working with kids, you're identifying the signs of a child who could get into juvenile detention, preventing and giving teachers the skills to work with kids. You know, if someone is having a mental health crisis in the community, working with 911, working with police, so that the skilled professionals can be there in that situation and divert or deflect that person from being arrested and immediately get them the mental health services that they would need. So with that sequential intercept model, you can see all the different points of where a person could be introduced to the criminal justice system. And so I would love to see ways for occupational therapy to be a part of the prevention all the way through the rehabilitative phases of incarceration.
That would be awesome. One day.
All right. As far as interventions for me, because I am physical disabilities, a lot of it is your standard outpatient rehab. There's a lot of stroke, TBI, all of the things that, you know, we've got these long-term, you know, inmates who are humans and they have fractures and they have cancer and they have, you know, all of the things that we all go through. But there was also a lot of, right now, I seem to have just a ton of tendon repairs. There's a lot of assault that goes on in the prison system. And so there are a lot of defensive wounds. And so I do a lot of hand therapy right now. Things that I would like to do. I feel like I would really like to delve more into the mental health area with OT in this particular setting. They don't use me much. Now, I'm a little bit of a disadvantage because I'm the only OT who is internal in the Georgia Department of Corrections in the state. So I'm very limited. I have to do the things that they absolutely have to do. So growing a program is difficult. And I don't think there's a lot of, I know we're going to talk about challenges, but I don't know that there are very many people other than me that really wants to grow this program more. We have several physical therapists throughout the state, but there's one speech and there's me. So things I would like to do would be to do more mental health programming, and I would love to look into developing some reentry stuff. And because I have the facility dog now, I would love to develop a puppy raising program within our system. I think that would just be just to see the reaction that Wesley, my dog, has had there. I really think that it would do a lot of good. And I'd love to have some more programs that address, occupational deprivation. There are so many people that are just looking for something productive and something creative to do that we just don't have the resources to do. And the infrastructure is not very welcoming to those ideas right now. I think that answered that.
Can you talk a little bit about Wesley's interventions, Mom? Sorry.
Yes, Lily, I can. So Wesley does a lot of things for a lot of people. When I first brought him into the practice, he's doing things like being part of my treatments. If someone is working on some fine motor coordination and they're working with some beads or something, he'll hold an end of the string. We try to incorporate him as much as possible. So I have one patient that every day he was working on, he had a stroke and he was working on range of motion. And so he groomed Wesley every day and just lived for it. And then we would take Wesley for a walk and we'd walk down the hall and he'd get to walk Wesley. So just kind of incorporating Wesley in any way we can think of, playing fetch or simply lying next to somebody on the mat while they're doing exercises. But also he brings a special quality because I'm in a situation, we are in a situation where we can't develop the same rapport with our patients that we might if we were at, a hospital or a nursing home or in a school setting. I can't talk about my family and what did you do this weekend? So Wesley is a great bridge to build a rapport because we can talk about him and there aren't any security risks there as far as that's concerned. And I've had inmates bring me pictures of their dogs that they keep in their dorm, and we talk about their experience with animals. And I've had several patients, even when I'm walking down the hallways, an orderly will stop me and it's the first time I've pet a dog in 25 years, so it's just bringing little things like that are some of the things that he brings. And staff, it's a hard job, and it can be very wearing to be in a situation where you have to be on guard. You're working with a population that is not always happy to be working with you, or they're under stress all the time. It's a stressful job, and so just having Wesley visit the nurses or the officers is just been a great thing. I could go on and on and on. Is there anything that you want me to bring up, Lily, I didn't mention right now?
No, you
Okay.
did a good job. He's a very great dog. I can attest.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lily. That was gonna be the next question, so you covered it. We already touched on this a little, but what are the unexpected challenges or challenges in general that you encounter when working with this population?
So I have a couple. I think working specifically in like a mental health setting, a lot of the patients that I've seen don't have support outside of the hospital. They don't have families they can reach out to. And especially in like a forensic long-term state hospital, the patients that I've worked with consistently over the course of the year. And, they sometimes mistake your kindness for other things. And so I think maintaining boundaries can be tricky because yes, I'm a member of the treatment team and kind of sticking to that, but like kind of creating the boundaries with your patient, saying, yes, I'm, being nice to you. I'm part of your treatment team. I see you every day. I talk to you every day. That doesn't mean that, we're in a relationship or anything like that. So I think kind of creating those boundaries and kind of being aware that like your kindness can be taken a different way and establishing that. So I think that's kind of a challenge that I expected, but didn't realize what was happening until this patient's like, oh my gosh, I wrote you this letter. And it was a big love, there was a line that was crossed somewhere. And I was like, I don't know how this happened. So I'd say that. And then I think another one is when I first started, I was the only OT that was actively like practicing in the hospital. And so I think kind of advocating for OT, I think Nicole touched on it a little bit, is like showing all that we can do. And then I think they would come to me for recommendations on discharge, and kind of sticking to my guns with, okay, social worker wants this person to go live independently, but I'm saying, oh yeah, they can do all these, their ADLs, and they can do all their basic, day-to-day occupations. However, they don't have the insight to realize I have a mental illness and I'm going to take my meds every day. And, I think it's balancing that pushback that you might get from social work based on your recommendations. And especially in this setting when, these patients have committed extreme felonies, and I'm going to spare you guys. It's kind of saying like, oh, this person can't live alone, but the social worker saying, oh, but you said they can live alone. And it's kind of balancing that. So that was kind of hard to manage, like pushback from other disciplines. But I think that comes with experience and confidence, and over time I was fine. But yeah, so those would be my main challenges I've experienced.
I think communicating the role of occupational therapy is always a thing that can be a challenge, and you'll see it through any workplace that you go to. It's just we're always an advocate for the profession. And in this case, most people haven't ever thought of OT in the context of doing reentry services. So that's a big one. And they still will default to case management or social work. So we really have to be there all the time, showing why it's so important for us to be on the team. Funding is always a challenge. So that's why it's hard to get these programs off the ground and keep them sustainable. I'm trying to advocate for, like we had that 5-year contract with the jail, more and more OT practitioners out there advocating for, it's great that I was able to volunteer while I was a fieldwork student, or, volunteer and do this as a capstone. But just as you would pay a psychiatrist, social worker, any other health professional in the facility, we, can also bill for our time. So I have found ways, like through attorneys, they will pay to have an OT eval done with their client. That's through like pro bono law clinics. The MacArthur Justice Center is one who's done that, and our St. Louis U Law Clinic. So they would pay the OT to do that. So finding creative ways for funding our role here is really important. And of course, I write grants, and we have grant funding as well. The last thing I thought I'd mention is consider a jail like an acute facility, and a prison like long-term rehab care. So, and the reason why I say that is because we've learned over time that when a person comes in jail, that should be a short-term stay. It's a very volatile situation. The person could still be in an acute phase in their mental health situation. A lot of times they're unhoused. They don't have resources. So they're more in a crisis situation typically. But once a person is sentenced and has their stay in prison, they've had more time to think about their situation. They might be in a different stage of change in preparing themselves for community life again. So the individuals that we work with are very different in those settings. And sometimes it was even more challenging to work with people in the jail setting, even though they got out more sooner than people in prison. When they got out, they just weren't stable. And so it was like their basic survival needs were not met because they didn't have housing. There's a housing shortage and, all that kind of stuff. So, so think about that. If you're trying to get into this work, do I want to try to serve jail population or prison population, and how those are very different from each other?
I think Kayley's absolutely right. Boundaries are a big thing. And there are several patients that I've experienced over the years that will push the boundaries, see what they can get away with. And going along with that, even things like trying to take equipment out of the clinic, or just that whole element of too much time on their hands, too many, things to try to think that they could do. Other challenges that I've had are security is a big thing because there are activities that we can't do. There's equipment we can't use. I mean, if you think about it, you've got a patient with a hip fracture, I can't give them a reacher, and how do you work around the fact that I can't give them, a dressing stick or a shoehorn or anything like that because it's a security risk. It can be, turned into a weapon. So, that's a challenge to try to be creative. And sometimes you just have to say, the nurse, we do have some acute beds, the nurse is just going to have to help you. You're just going to have to get help from somebody in your dorm because I can't give you, an adaptive equipment that you might be able to be more independent with. And that's a challenge that's frustrating. We've had several occasions where security has shaken down a dorm to try to get rid of contraband, and they'll take someone's cane and they'll take someone's walker because it's laying around and they're in their wheelchair in the other room at the time. And so we have patients come back up to the clinic and they're like, security took my stuff. I can't walk around. I don't have it anymore. Can I get another one? So that's, or my splint, they took my splint. I don't have a hand splint anymore. So, there's a lot of reissuing, recreating, trying to figure out what happened to it. Did they sell it or did it, was it taken from them? There's a lot, it's complicated. It's never a black and white thing. So that's a challenge. Not being able to do ADLs in the way I would do them with the patient in another hospital because I can't be alone in their room with them while they're undressing or in a place where they could close the door behind me and, I'm stuck in their room until security gets there. So that presents a challenge in itself. What else? I was thinking of something else. Maybe it'll come to me. But just general buying into therapy, having, security and other staff buy into the need for patients to come to their therapy, and just attendance. There, a lot of times patients will be coming up from their dorms and they'll take the opportunity instead of going to the clinic to go do some business with somebody somewhere. So, trying to make sure that we have good attendance at their therapy and good compliance.
Thank you all for sharing. So kind of going opposite of the challenge, what makes this setting so rewarding?
I'd like to say just seeing the patients grow and develop. So just like in inpatient rehab, with a patient with a knee replacement, growing through that process of regaining their independence. I know a lot of my patients, they've come in, they're at their worst of their worst. Maybe it's their first psychotic break. Maybe it's, XYZ, things are happening in their life. And, they come in at their lowest and kind of over time, just watching them kind of gain their autonomy back and kind of gain their confidence back. Even just like day to day, like little tiny wins. They made a goal of talking to their doctor and later in the day they say, hey, Dr. Renz, like I talked to my doctor today and it's like a win, like, yay. Like, so being able to like cheer my patients on and kind of watching them succeed and get to the point that they are about to get discharged. I think that's honestly the most rewarding. And even up here at Western Psych too, it's a lot quicker turnaround, but the same kind of thing happens. It's kind of working with a patient over the past week and, seeing them come in and they're not doing too well. And then as the week goes on, they're like, oh my gosh, Kayley, like, I'm ready to leave. Like, I'm feeling good. And I'm like, yay, like, good job. So I think that is probably the most rewarding part of this.
I'll talk about it from the worker side and from the services we do with people incarcerated. In terms of workplace health, when I started doing studies to learn about the needs of people working in prison and jails, they were appreciative and just so thankful and grateful for me even asking them about their work, because nobody asked them about their work. Like they call themselves the redheaded stepchild of public safety, police, firefighting, EMS, paramedics, out of all those types of public safety workforces, correctional officers, in the media and in a lot of places are stigmatized and talked about negatively. So I think what's rewarding is that I'm able to do projects to look at their experiences around stress and trauma, and then use my OT hat to think about interventions and what kind of interventions could be effective to support them, because we know they have super high rates of depression, PTSD, and suicide. It is not a healthy place to work in most cases. So in terms of working with people incarcerated, what's rewarding is that if I improve the workplace as a whole, it's going to improve the experience of the individuals held in those facilities as well. If you have a pissed off correctional officer, you know, they're not going to have a great experience working with a shakedown, or, you know, looking into someone's cell, or the 5 checks that they have to do during that day. It's gonna, you know, the toxicity and the negativity is gonna go into the people held there. And then, you know, you can kind of see how it would have a chain reaction. So I think that's what's rewarding, is that I'm able to now talk more freely about thinking about jails and prisons as workplaces, and then how does that have an impact on people incarcerated. And then one particular group of people that we've worked with are those who were held, they were sentenced as a juvenile to life without the option of parole. And that's been a really strong subset of individuals that we've worked with. And when I've worked with a few of them, and then our staff have as well, we'll hear the stories of that individual who never, ever thought that they could get out of prison because they had a life sentence. And because of the change, the Supreme Court ruling that changed this and allowed them to petition for their parole for the first time, I learned, you know, about the person's lived experience and how they did restorative justice services, how they support other people incarcerated, how they've done these occupations around just having a more fulfilling life. And they did all those things, never, ever thinking that they would get out of prison. They genuinely did these things. So I feel like that's really rewarding to hear these stories and then support individuals, because, you know, the majority of people who are held in jails and prisons will return to the community. So it only makes sense to support them.
I think, yeah, watching my patients meet their goals and feel like they've accomplished something that they've really had to work hard for. You know, they're in a position where they don't have, you know, their family support all the time, or a lot of people on their side hoping that they, you know, can reach their goals and do something great. And, you know, sometimes their goals for their, you know, self-care and independence are, you know, it's life or death. You know, if you're in a situation where you have to take care of yourself, or you become a target, you know, then, you know, we have so many patients that are just so grateful for the time and the care that we take with them. And of course, with Wesley, you know, I see so many, so much happiness and joy that comes from that. There's this one patient that Lily's heard me talk about, this patient, and he's in his 60s, and he's blind, and he's just sits in this room, you know, all the time by himself. And when I take Wesley in to see him, it's just, I mean, it's life-changing for him. And you can see over time, his whole affect has just become so much more engaging, and just so much joy when he sees Wesley. So yeah, those are the things that make it worthwhile.
Thank you guys for sharing. I'll ask one more question, and then I'll leave it open for the people in person and on Zoom to ask questions. What are some tips for an entry-level OT to get involved with working with people who are incarcerated, or people who are reentering the community after incarceration?
So I would recommend just putting yourself out there, and like not being afraid to apply for those, like, I don't want to say bigger, fancier jobs, but like the government jobs that you wouldn't think, oh, I'm just a new grad, like I would never get it, because surprise, you will. And I think when, you know, specifically applying for jobs, don't hesitate to, you know, either type up a quick cover letter, or if there's like a section for like additional information, kind of like building yourself up, just saying, hey, like, I know I'm a new grad OT, but I come with this, excitement. I'm ready to go. Like, I'm ready to learn. And yeah, like putting yourself out there, selling yourself. Because I personally do feel that people read those and like the person with more experience may not have the, excitement and, excitement to learn, I guess. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but, so something like that. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. It sounds scary working at a jail or at a state psychiatric hospital. It's not. These people are people. You just kind of treat them as a human before what you read in their chart is kind of my advice for that is, some of these people do terrible things, but, at that point they were very, very sick. And so kind of coming at it from that perspective of this person is a human before anything else, kind of really makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, I think those are really great tips. I even did that when I first started working because I was looking for a job in ergonomics, and there weren't OTs doing ergonomics necessarily, but I scoured every job posting that I could find in my area. I would look for key terms such as reentry in the job description. If you're looking for reentry type jobs, there's definitely OT rehab type jobs that are listed as OT. But, and then like Kayley was saying in your cover letter, really be specific about, and I can focus on those everyday living activities and support an individual for returning to the community and look at their, if they have a cognitive challenge, if they have some sort of disability, mental health challenge, and really focus specifically on those things. If you're trying to build a program and pitching it to a jail or prison, I would suggest pitching that to an OT colleague who's done some work in that space first. And I've helped people kind of tweak their proposals in the past and kind of guide those conversations. I also teach our community-based practice course here at St. Louis U, and I highly recommend using a community-based participatory approach where you listen first before pitching anything. So, ask for a meeting with someone at the facility, talk to someone who's already in the facility and ask them questions like, what are your needs here? Like, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing? And listen and ask more questions. And then think, okay, as an OT, what could I do to support their specific needs around workplace health or reentry? And like what we've done at a prison facility more recently is they have students in their their education classes, like working on their high school equivalency. And I've asked them, do you have any challenges working with individuals who might be on the autism spectrum or have attention challenges? And like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. Okay. So now we have OT students working on a very specific project focusing on attention and emotional regulation and these very specific concepts. So see how you could address a need that they have. And then they might be like, oh yeah, we totally need you here, versus like, and this is OT, and this is why you need OT, and we're OT. You know what I mean? So like focus on what they need. And I think it'll help you get further with it.
That's great. And I agree with all of that. Find a mentor, find somebody who's working in a field that you want. This is, especially this field, it's challenging. I mean, for all of the great things that can come of it, it's different. And I think that you would do well to find somebody who can support you through that and make sure that you have a good understanding of what you're doing and just kind of guide you through it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to leave the last 8-ish minutes open for any questions from people on Zoom or in class. Rhea. Okay.
I know, Nicole, that you talked a bit about like resources and having like all of those challenges regarding like having adequate resources to treat your patients. Could you give some examples of some workarounds that you did in the past?
It's challenging. There's not always a lot of workarounds to be found, but for example, I'd love to give somebody a home program. I'd love to give them some TheraBand so that they can continue, especially because, well, about a year and a half ago, the medical oversight for the Georgia Department of Corrections was privatized, and that's been unique. So just like, you know, insurance companies will only give somebody a certain number of visits, we're struggling with that now too. So I'd love to be able to give someone a home program. I can't give them therapy. I can't give them, you know, any kind of therapy or anything to work with for strengthening. So we have to think about things like, okay, can you get a water bottle? Can you get a bag of ice? Can you get a book? Can you use those as weights? Can you, you know, where can you, you know, grade some push-ups from the wall to a chair before you get to the floor? And you'd be surprised, these guys, I mean, they have a lot of time. They can be very creative. And a lot of them are already thinking about ways to work around things that they don't have access to. Also, you know, a lot of them have, you know, they have friends that will help them get dressed if we can't find a way to help them get dressed. So relying on, you know, friends that they have or you know, cellmates or whatever. But other than that, you know, staff may have to help them with some things.
Can ask one more question, do a few more minutes. We already kind of talked about this. When you advocate for OT in this setting, how is it different than in the other settings?
So snapshot of when I started, there wasn't an OT. Like my supervisor was technically an OT, but she did not like go out on the unit. She was in that supervisor role. She managed the whole rec therapy department and music therapy and all that. So every day I was advocating for what I can do. And I think over time through like my actions, I was able to kind of show what OT can do. Because oftentimes the doctor would be like, oh, this patient's having trouble, you know, with just like basic like functional mobility. And they're like, oh, we need to call in PT and take them to a different hospital so they can get physical therapy with doing things that like I could do in-house and not have to put the patient through the trauma of putting on cuffs and having to go to a different facility for that. So I think over time I was able to advocate saying, you know, no, I can do all that here. We can do the, you know, physical disability kind of things. And then on top of that, just showing that, yes, like a patient may have like ADL deficits and saying like, hey, like I can meet with this person, you know, a certain number of times a week. And I think by showing that patient's progress over time, it kind of spread to other units and saying like, oh my gosh, like refer to OT. It helps with patients' discharge disposition and builds independence, and you know makes it easier for these patients to go to placements because they, you know, had experience with OT and were able to kind of do things more independently. So every day was an advocacy day, basically.
All right, Lily, I saw Lily's question about what a prison puppy raising program might look like. So there are some in existence that Canine Companions does. And what I know about them is that you'll have the puppies that will be assigned with an inmate that will do all of, you know, all of the daily care throughout the week. And then you'll have volunteers that will take the puppies to socialize them in the community on the weekends. As far as how, you know, it could be a great OT program, I think bringing the inmates together with puppy classes, giving them, you know, this puppy that they have to care for, it, you know, it's a great psychosocial way to engage in something meaningful and bring meaning to their life, while also knowing that they are giving back to the community and you know, helping other people. I just think that there's such a personal investment there that it's something that it would be great for self-esteem, for and also to address that occupational deprivation of not having, you know, a purpose or things to do, or, you know, some kind of activity that is really that brings meaning to your life, like we all need. Did that answer that, Lily?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll chime in a little on the puppies program. I totally agree. They're phenomenal. In Missouri, they have the Puppies for Parole program, and you can Google it and see that it's a statewide thing where the individual held in the facility, they become certified in animal handling. So it gives them a skill that they can use when they return to the community, and they receive dogs from shelters that would otherwise maybe be euthanized if they're not adopted. So they're saving the dogs, they're giving the handlers a skill, and then those puppies can be adopted later. So if you go on their website, you'll see like all the puppies that have been trained. And I thought for some reason those puppies were also trained as some of them as service animals, but I might be jumping too far forward with that. But it's a phenomenal program all around, serving the community, serving the individuals held in the facility, the dogs, and I think they live in the facility too. What I wish is that, you know, there's something like, gosh, I can't remember how many tens of thousands of people in the system, in the state. There's quite a few. So these types of programs are awesome, but they only touch a few people because it's hard to build that out. So having a puppy program, having maybe gardening, they also do things like gardening for fresh food to purchase in-house and to donate to the community. If we think about occupations in the facilities, just using your OT lens and going in and being like a partner and thinking about how to utilize leisure time and skilled, you know, employment, skills building, you could build out, you know, endless types of programs like this. So I just encourage any kind of brainstorming and occupation-based skills training can really be a nice way to partner with a facility.
Absolutely. The sky's the limit. I mean, really.
Thank you all so much. This is super informative and helpful. If there's no other questions, we'll let you guys go. But we thank you for your time, and I'll definitely send out the Zoom link for those that want it. And then are you guys okay if I share your emails with anyone that would like to stay in touch?
Yes, please reach out anytime.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone. It was a pleasure.